My name's Carol Lavazetta. I'm an environmental educator based in Wisconsin. Today I'd like to share with you a series of videos that I made during March of this year. I'd like you to look at the seasonal changes that take place in northern climates during the early spring and late winter. While we're walking, I want you to use your senses to notice what you see and hear. During this time of year, there's many changes that take place in our environment. Some of those changes are things that we see, and some are things that we do not see. By the end of our short walk today, you'll have learned some new things about spring and the change of seasons, and you'll even have learned some new words. So, come on, let's walk and get started. One of the key things about spring's arrival in northern climates is that our snow starts to disappear. You may have noticed this already. It's only the 3rd of March and it's almost 50 degrees out. But as I walk towards the edge of our apple orchard, you can see big swaths of grass. It's still brown, but it was underneath the snow. And as the snow melts, it serves a few important functions. You can see that it's melting, it's very wet, and the grass is still mostly brown. But as the snow melts, it gives water to the ground and the grass underneath. So what is it about spring in northern climates that causes our snow to melt? One thing is that we have longer days. You may have noticed this already, that we have more sunshine in the late afternoon than we did a few months ago. Along with the longer days come warmer temperatures. The sunshine and the warmer temperatures help to melt the snow and turn it into water, and the water goes into the ground to nourish the plants that are starting to grow underneath. An example of that are these tulips that are starting to emerge from the ground. Tulips are flower bulbs, and they grow under the ground during the winter, making roots, so that when the springtime comes and water feeds the roots, it signals that it's time for them to grow. Let's talk about those longer days for a minute. We all know that during the winter, when we get up to go to school, it might be dark outside, barely getting light by the time you arrive at school. But over time, the length of our day gets longer, and this is known as photoperiod. Photoperiod is your day length, or the length of time each day that organisms receive sunlight. Organisms include things like plants, animals, and even humans. All living things respond to light. More light through longer days in the spring signals plants to grow. By the time the calendar moves from February 1st and arrives at April 1st, we have received almost 3 extra hours of sunlight during the day. On April 1st, our photoperiod is 12 hours and 46 minutes. It's just a fancy way of saying that's how much sunlight we got. Let's go on another walk. Today it's March 20th. It is the spring equinox, or the first day of spring. Equinox is a Latin word meaning equal night. Today will have approximately equal hours of day and night. Between my first taping on the 3rd of March and today, the 20th of March, the apple orchard looks about the same. The ground looks a little different, and we've had a snowstorm in between March 3rd and March 20th, but you can see it's all melted now. The sky is nice and blue, and things are starting to green up just a little bit. The changes of the seasons, in this case from winter to spring, and the signs as well as the timing of those changes is a science called phenology. At the beginning of our walk, I asked you to use your senses to notice changes in our environment. So far, we've used our sense of vision to notice things like the snow melting, bulbs sprouting, and more sunshine in our days. We've noticed the day is a little longer, and the ground might feel softer or squishier with the steps, as there is more water in the soil. Certainly you've noticed puddles and mud. Over the next few minutes of the video, you can see some of the changes that have taken place in my yard. As the bulbs go from this to this, to sprouting, to this, fully flowering, beautiful plants later in the spring, right in my yard. In the spring, trees in our yard, like those in our fruit orchard that we've been looking at, go from having no leaves to then budding. This begins a process called leaf out, and it just means that the leaves are coming out on the trees. Fruit trees are not the only type of tree to go through this process. You'll see other trees doing it as well. But what's special about the fruit trees is that we've got to have the return of the bees before the blossoms disappear. The bees visit the blossoms and pollinate them so that in the fall we can have fruit. This is a view of the Mississippi just after leaf out in May of 2019. And here are some magnolia buds and then the magnolia flower at a school in the La Crosse School District. And finally, towards the end of May, we have beautiful lilac trees and milkweed erupting from the ground. You know what comes next, don't you? I'll give you a hint. But we're really getting ahead of ourselves. At the beginning of the video, I asked you to use both your senses of sight and hearing to notice the signs of spring. Now I'd like to focus on what we hear in the spring. What do you think we'll hear? What kind of animal noises do we hear in the spring? Let's take a listen. While some birds, like cardinals, stay all winter long, many do not. When we start to see the birds return, this is a sign of spring. You might notice robins, eastern bluebirds, red-winged blackbirds, and even hummingbirds, my favorite. Hummingbirds only return to our yards once it gets warm enough. Here in Wisconsin, we hear not only songbirds in the spring, but also woodpeckers, sandhill cranes, and trumpet swans, as well as loons, as they return to us when our weather warms up. Take a listen. Sometimes in the spring we have lots of rain and wind. These are things we can hear. And the rain is something we can see, but we don't see the wind. If you live near any water, in the spring you might be able to hear the frogs start to call. We have lots of frogs in Wisconsin. This is a leopard frog. Frogs are only one of the animals that return to us in the spring. What have you learned about some other animals and what happens with them in the springtime? This might be a good time to stop the video and talk about the signs of spring that you've noticed. Also, during our walk, I've used some words that might be new to you. Over the next few slides, you can learn a simplified version of what these words mean. Can you provide examples of each word? This is the last part of our video walk for today, and it's March 29th. You can see that it's a beautiful day here in the driftless region of Wisconsin. It's about 70 degrees, which is a lot warmer than we usually are, but that's the case with spring in some northern climates. We have variable temperatures. Tomorrow's supposed to be in the 40s. But it's beautiful. It's very windy today, which is one of those things we talked about, that you can feel the wind and hear the wind. You can't see the wind unless you look at something like my hair or the trees behind me. We're near the apple orchard still. It still looks pretty much the same, but you can see that the grass has started to green up, and we still have a nice blue sky. So we've been through a lot of changes so far in only the 3 weeks that I've been sharing the videos with you, and there's more changes to come in the next several weeks. Get out there and explore. Look for those signs of spring. Use all your senses. What did we miss? There's probably some things that we missed when we talked about the signs of spring. Have a good time while you're outside. Stop and notice things. Look down at your feet. What's under your feet? What's in the air? What's out in front of you? Take time to look, listen, feel, and enjoy. Thanks for having me today.